Ever wonder about your past? Who you were in a bygone era? What karmic curses you may be carrying with you? Well, wonder no more. Today we've got a very special Intentional Living with Courtney Myers as we sit down with Sonia Tully, a fourth-generation intuitive, author, and podcaster, just to name a few of her many talents. And we're diving deep into a discussion about past lives and how they inform and influence our present. It's not just me talking today, so buckle up. We're in for an intentional treat. Hi, Sonia. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. I am so excited to have you. And today, I just wanted to talk to you about past lives. I know we kind of talked about, that's what we're going to talk about today, because you are doing all these different past life readings I've seen. And it's something that's like super fascinating to me. I actually had a girlfriend of mine is kind of practicing her reading skills the other day, and she did a tarot reading for me because she wanted to practice on someone. I said, go for it. And she started talking about past lives with me, that my husband and I had this past lives back in the Middle Ages where we were helping people in the religious war and bringing in all these refugees and stuff. So I just kind of wanted to talk about like, past lives, do we all have them? How do we connect to them? And how do they kind of inform and influence like what we're doing now in our present life?
Yeah, I love these questions. So first of all, I would say that most of us have past lives. Mm-hmm. You know, past lives, and when I think of a past life, I think of also just the word karma, which often gets confused in our world of like karma is going to come to get you. But it's really about how our decisions inform us. So where we have our past lives often show up as a karmic emotional imprint. This is how our relationships form. And really, in a lot of ways, just like in every lifetime, we become skilled in one area. For example, in this lifetime, I'm an intuitive teacher and writer. That's one of my things. And so from the lessons of that will often be your goal. These are things that we can find ourselves naturally good at, gravitating towards, but also in a way, when we reincarnate into a new lifetime, what we really want to do is learn new things. Because each time we incarnate, our soul is in what we call soul school. So this is what we're here to learn. So the very first thing that I would say, because you had a few different questions. Do we all have past lives? How do we access our past lives? When I really am talking about accessing past lives, the first thing I always invite my clients to do is first even be curious. A lot of times, it's like our ego intellect can inform our world and really want to be right. And I find that even with past lives that we often find ourselves gravitating towards either places or things or even relationship patterns that are familiar, things that we have done before. So for example, is there any places for yourself where you feel really like attached, like really drawn to, where you're like, oh my goodness, I would love to go there, or I feel called?
Well, this is really interesting, and I think it's one of the things that's got me into the idea of past lives is I grew up in San Diego, and you had to take a foreign language when you were in high school, and some people did in junior high. You grew up in San Diego, you're right near the border, everyone takes Spanish, and I just refused. I'm like, no, I'm learning French. I am taking French. I am going to be fluent in French. I am going to be a supermodel and walk on a runway in France. Little did I know, I'm 5'2", and I'm never going to be a supermodel.
Hey.
I took French. I took French for all 4 years of high school. I went into college. It was my second major for a little while. Unfortunately, I never became fluent because it wasn't conversational. It was more like book reading of French, book reading in French. And then I always had this dream to live in France or go to France. And it's really, I think, interesting because I feel very connected to you and your family because of your whole French connections. And I know you're in New Orleans. I love that area. It feels very French to me. So I've always kind of gravitated towards that. I have French culture, French history, the royal courts. my name wasn't even supposed to be Courtney when I was born. My parents looked at me and said, no, her name's not Heather or Brooke or whatever they were going to call me. They're like, her name is Courtney, which means of the court. And I did have another reading at one point in my life where someone said I had a past life in a French court. And all of a sudden, 2 and 2 clicked, and it's like, oh, this makes sense. Maybe this is why I have all these interests.
Yeah, absolutely. And how you could find and see, just even as we talk about, it's like our soul naturally aligns with, even our soul history. So for you, as you were saying, it was like after even everybody's taking Spanish, it makes intellectual sense to take Spanish because you're living in San Diego. But karmically being tied to France, and I'm totally see you as like regal royalty in the French court, and your parents being like, it's Courtney, that we that oftentimes it's like our soul has a memory, and often that is where it's like it doesn't necessarily make sense to the intellect, but there is some part of us that comes from our past life history that says, okay, like I need to learn French and I'm going to go be a supermodel, which is at the same time for me, I'm like, I will just say like, that's so past life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even I would say, just even as you're talking about it, I'm sure, you can feel even in your body how everything resonates. When we talk about intuition, we talk about these different things. It doesn't, it's like intellectually you can be like, oh, does that make sense? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But then when you tune into your physical body of your container, you're like, oh, that feels true, instead of, is that right?
So what can we learn from that? So, I mean, I feel like that is one way to like understand if you've had a past life in something is to, my feeling is, where do your interests lie? Just like, I was very obsessed with the French culture. It's like, okay, there has to be something deeper here of why this is here. So aside from that, like, what do you do with that when you tap into it, when you realize that you have this connection to something in a past life? And how does it kind of affect you now? Like, where do you go with that?
Well, I'd say oftentimes our past lives, like I said, leave a karmic emotional imprint. And often it's where we have unfinished business.
Okay.
Right. So, for example, being as a part of the court in France, maybe that was also a lifetime of you for you. That there were a lot of things that you enjoy, but even as an emotional karmic underpinning, thinking about a French court often means that you also had to adhere to a lot of social norms, a lot of things that actually didn't foster your independence or your autonomy. And so for yourself in this soul lifetime, there is some part of you that wants to access that brings in that emotional memory. So when we're thinking about our past lives, it's interesting because I think, there's the outside stuff, which is really interesting, which is kind of like the what, where, when, how. But what I find even more important is to think about the emotional soul memory. Where is a pattern that repeats over and over again that we're trying to resolve in this lifetime? And one way that you can really look at that is where in your relationships, because part of being in soul school, being in our day-to-day lives, are relationships. It's like where it's often our biggest teachers, our biggest lessons. So if we think about our emotional karmic imprint, it's where do we gravitate towards what's familiar? So for example, it'll take for you if the past life of being in a court, maybe not having the same amount of autonomy, maybe in this lifetime, where for yourself is there a reflex to gravitate towards what is familiar, to blend to whatever, as opposed to the part of yourself that wants to grow into finding your own identity, definition, your own sense of self, your own different autonomy. So I think of the past lives themselves as like set dressings in a way. And for us, even if you're not familiar with exactly what your past life is, really thinking about it in terms of where are the emotional patterns in your life that need some resolution. They can also be the seed of our gifts, and also can be where our blind spots are. So using that lens of curiosity and intuition can open up a different sense of listening and learning.
It's interesting. It's almost like you're psychic and doing your reading on me right now. The whole autonomy thing and finding your own place and your own voice is, spot on for me. And it's actually a lot of what I'm talking about in all my work and my videos and things like that, is finding your true authentic self, finding your voice. Stop stop putting out the facade of someone else, or stop people pleasing, stop being something that other people want you to be. I've spent a majority of my life doing that. I'm 41 now, and just really over the last year, finally standing on my own 2 feet and saying, no, this is what I want. I'm not doing exactly what everyone expects of me, which coincides exactly with what you're saying. And it's kind of what the whole point of what I'm doing is to help other people step into like their authentic self and really just get comfortable in who they are, which I think your past lives can really help you do that. So I guess you would say is your past lives are kind of like big signals or big flags, like here's a lesson, here's something that you need to lean into. It's not necessarily like karma, you have bad karma with you, 7 years of bad karma because you did this thing, it's more like, okay, this is not where you failed, but this is somewhere where you need to grow more, or an experience that you didn't fully experience as you were supposed to in that past life, and you can redo it here.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was saying, we are in soul school, and as we reincarnate, that is where we get to practice these new lessons. And even as you were saying for yourself, for a long time, you're like, it's like you're doing a reading on me. And I'm like, I'm really flexing into not only my own autonomy, individuality, but that's also where healing happens, on a soul level of saying, okay, I've got that lesson. I learned how to blend. I learned how to fit in, but in this lifetime, I'm doing something different. And when we think about past lives, when you think about healing, it also requires a certain amount of self-awareness and courage. As my mom would always say, courage comes from the French word heart, which also just means that we can look clearly at ourselves, at our relationships, at our emotional states, and say, where am I in alignment, and where also do I need to grow? And so the past life of what, like I said, the set dressing can be, doesn't have to be a roadblock for anyone to also be curious and lean into where their spirit and soul is calling them to grow. All it really requires is a little bit of curiosity and even a bit of imagination, because intuition and imagination come in as twins. And if we think about our past life, we have our subconscious, which constantly registers. It's like a journal in a sense. It registers all of our past experiences. And so when we can quiet the conscious mind and really be curious of in our subconscious, that's where different things will show up. Those are how you'll be able to be informed by your intuition, by your past lives, by where your soul wants you to grow, because it's the strongest force that we have. We as human beings in a soul, in a human experience, want to grow. And so I'll say that just within that, having that, like, I'm curious and courageous enough to lead into the unknown to see what shows up as something that will surprise me.
So what happens when you're living a life now, which is a question I had with someone I'm working with. And one of her big issues is she feels called to do something else. She feels her soul is being pushed in one direction. Her husband's not along for the ride, let's just say. So what happens when you reincarnate with someone that's not necessarily on that same soul path? Because I had a teacher early on, one of my very first spiritual teachers. She taught me a lot about soul school, soul classes, and kind of this idea that you continue to come in with the same group of people. Like, I could be the mom in this lifetime, I could be the child in the next lifetime. Like, do you make these decisions coming in that you're going to like be with the same soul group from a past life before you get here? And how does that work? How do you guys kind of work in conjunction to bring those lessons from your past life into this lifetime so that you can work on them?
Well, we do reincarnate as groups over and over and over again. And I would say it's not necessarily us that makes our decision, but what's in the best interest for our soul. I also say that we have, in our human lives, we have free will choice, because I also feel like in a lot of ways we also want to stay away from, what's the word that I'm looking for? Sometimes in spirituality that I can find be a little bit too dogmatic around what is your responsibility or your stuff versus just kind of, I don't want to say fate, but even just how we choose to incarnate. So your first question of like, why do we choose these difficult relationships? So for example, with your client and her husband who isn't on board for the ride, then we have to look at what's underneath. So even there, we can have a curiosity of maybe this is a lesson for her around approval and even finding her own power that then doesn't have to create more divide in a relationship, but create more intimacy. Because I would say even from there, if I think about it, even from a past life perspective, it's sort of like what's underneath being said. What is your emotional responsibility versus what is someone else's? And I'd say that we reincarnate into these same relationships because it is not only familiar, but again, that we have lessons there that we still need to learn. And, when I think about our past lives and really how they inform our life and our relationships, because like I said, our big thing is as human beings is often relationships are our biggest soul school. So I definitely would say that it's thinking about, like I said, that emotional underpinning that can point us to what our lesson is and our true north without getting so much caught up in the why, but paying attention to the what.
So no matter what, you're going to come in. Well, you're not always going to come in with a past life because not everyone is going to have a past life, right? So you could be coming in. This could be your first life. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can see people who are also just young souls, and I'd say often that a young soul is here to is here to learn. You can often tell a young soul by I just even think about how they navigate and make decisions in life. They're learning, just like a little kid. We're learning how to make decisions. We're learning about our autonomy. We're learning these different things. And then, but I'd say most people have past lives. Most people have a little bit of practice of what we come in with. And then this also comes into like reincarnation and karma, and also of like when and especially in like the Hindu perspective, it's like when we learn all of our soul lessons, that's when we become enlightened and get out of our human vehicle that is limiting.
What if you don't really learn whatever lesson you're pulling from your past life, you're just going to continue to reincarnate with that same set of scenario, most likely, until you graduate. Level.
Yeah, until you graduate. It's like graduating soul school. It's like learning one lesson and then you get to learn a different lesson. But I also think of it as, being a human being is a lot of different experiences, but it's also a pretty magical experience to be a soul in a human body.
It's really magical, I think, when you start tapping into what your intuition is. And it's something I know for me, I know I have a long lineage in it. Like, I know it's there. I don't think my family was very open to it. And I've always been interested by it. So I've come around time and time again until finally I'm like, nope, I'm going there. This is it. I'm not going to like go in and out anymore. But it's interesting, my family isn't so on board always either. It's definitely lessons learning how to, really own this. But it is magical once you actually step into it, for sure. I mean, the things that you can do, the things that you can create when you learn that you are actually a creator of your life, it doesn't mean it's easy, but it's definitely fascinating. Like, the whole study of watching it happen is really fascinating. And going back to like the whole past lives thing, I know we were talking about children when they come in. I know children oftentimes, I'm guessing that our children, when we have them, are a lot of times older souls than us, because I think children are our greatest teachers. Having two very young kids, I've noticed how much I've learned just watching them, how intuitive they inherently are. And I get why people say kids are old souls, because they're not shut off yet. And I mean, is there some sort of truth to that children a lot of, I mean, they are our teachers. So a lot of times they're older souls than us. They're bringing us lessons that maybe we weren't picking up on or something earlier on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say again, that's where our constellations of families are our greatest teachers. And we come in so available, curious, listening, intuitive, and know who we are. So even right now, I have my niece, and it's really amazing to watch her because she just turned 2, but she came in on a soul level of just exactly who she is without any filters. I'm like, she's an old soul. She's because kids are very wise. And, where you're saying it's like, then we get older, we age, we learn, our ego develops, which is not a bad thing. Our ego is our protective shell that separates our sense of self out from the world. But what we do is as we age is we often get more defenses. So we're learning how to get back to that childlike state of wonder and listening and curiosity and intuition and flexibility that is internal within us. So I'd say that a lot of kids are very old souls. I mean, I know that for my niece, she came in as a very old soul and teaches me a lot of different lessons. And so it's important that we can also, if you have the blessing of just even kids around you, whether you have them yourself, as just a model of how we can even incorporate these lessons from our past life, because I feel like in our human self, we can get very fixed on how we are, how conditions are, how we expect things to turn out. For example, with your client and her husband, there's often this idea that in our human selves, we can get fixed, that it's like, if I try something new, or if I really lean into my woo-woo, then I already know how things will unfold and it's going to be, worst case scenario. When in reality, you don't know. You don't know.
No,
it might be different or uncomfortable.
I think that's one of my favorite things that you and your mom and your sister, you guys are always talking about, is like, you don't know everything there is to know. And I'm constantly reminding I play that in my head over and over again. I mean, obviously I've been mentored by your mom now for over a year. So I'm very much like aware of that. I have that voice in my head, just trying to unravel these things, these conditionings that I have grown up. Not that it's not even to blame anyone. It's just the conditionings that you have over and over again. Kind of let that go and step into this. Like, you really don't know how things are going to work out. You don't know what's going to happen when you wake up in the morning till the time you go to bed. Like, you really, really, truly don't.
Yeah.
And when you lean in and open yourself up to this, it's just it's really exciting, actually.
It is. And, also in that same place, when we can look about conditioning from our, as you call our family of origin, it's not, I find that a lot of times it can be hard because we can put morality of like, it's good or bad, right or wrong, when in another way, it's like, I learned a lot of good lessons. I got a lot of really good gifts, and I got other things that maybe don't actually work for me or in alignment with what is truth, or for me, my own universal truth. And when we can even first start to have compassion for ourselves, our conditioning, what we learn, then we can also have compassion for our imperfect families, that then gives us even more grace and appreciation, instead of making it a binary, that our minds always like to make it a binary, which is not true.
So I think what you're truly saying is, when we're talking about past lives, we're really talking about almost past relationships.
Yes.
That is really at the core of it. It's not necessarily, I got to be a princess in a French court. It's like, this is what I dealt with in this scenario and these kinds of relationships, and that's what you're bringing into this life.
Yeah. And also at the same time, it's like, just like when you've learned a lesson from a past life, there are muscles that got really strengthened. For example, for yourself, where you think about, let's just take the example of being in the French court, of learning how to navigate different relationships using reason or balance, or being equanimitous in one way or a way. Those might be some of the different gifts that you came in with, that we learned in how to be in relationship. And then you incarnate into this life, and there are other muscles where it's like, I developed those really well. These are muscles that I actually need to develop that are different and new that will help me grow. And so, like I said, it's like if we want to learn about our past lives, we can start to look at, what are the present conditions that are happening? What is so? And that will really inform us.
Yeah, like for me, I think I really learned how to keep the peace, just go with the flow, make sure everything is happy and pretty and nice. And now I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to make everyone happy. I need to step into my truth, my autonomy. I need to set myself out there. And so and obviously it's a struggle. It's something I'm working on now. So it's really fascinating when you look at it from a past life perspective. You are the way you are for a reason, because it could be something you brought in with you. And then you can learn another side of it if you own that and step into that opposite almost.
Right. It's almost like where you can learn your innate gifts, use it as a skill set, but not rely on what is comfortable. And often, as you said, it will change. And then it's go ahead.
A past life is going to show up in your life as something familiar or comfortable, most likely.
Yes. It will show up as a familiar relationship, a familiar pattern, and you can even look through your life. Do I have, for example, you can have past life relationships where you overly, it's like even in this life, maybe I've had a lot of places where I've accommodated people all the time to my own detriment. And that's something that's familiar and easy for me in one way or another, but on a deeper level, I feel like that's a level of my own self-abandonment. And then
I always say you have to get uncomfortable. If you want to grow, if you want to expand, if you want to go anywhere, if you want to live, you have to get uncomfortable. That's kind of something I always come back to when I talk about this stuff is if you want any sort of growth in your life, you're going to have to push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. And I'd say our comfort zone can get smaller and smaller and smaller. And also, as one thing that I learned from my mom, Sonia Tully, is being uncomfortable doesn't mean that you're in danger. Mm-hmm. And where we often gravitate towards what's familiar is often that same reflex of that our little ego intellect that tries to keep us safe. It's I know this block, so let's stay on this block. Maybe let's just go one more spin around this block. And after a while, you're this block is really small. So I always feel go towards what scares you a bit. What scares you?
It's almost like your ego is going to keep you in that boring zone. If you feel like your life is kind of stagnant or stale or boring in a way, you're most likely living in your ego. You're most likely living in that comfort and on that comfortable block. And you should kind of really tap into these things that might pique your interest a little bit and push you outside of it.
Yeah. And I'll say this in about the whole world of intuition, past life, you always have choice. That's one thing that we came in with. You always have a choice, and your higher self, your guides, your angels, the divine will love you unconditionally. There is no dogmatic approach that you can fail in human school, but we will gravitate towards what's familiar, because even evolutionary, we have something within us called the negativity bias, which means we're always looking for what's not going to work. But when we can, again, recognize that we're not in danger, follow those breadcrumbs of curiosity, because like I said, even at the beginning, it requires a certain amount of courage to look inward and say, what is and isn't working in my life? And am I open to letting go of control, to be open to change? That might be something that would be wonderful and surprise me. Those places that pique your curiosity I always think of them as breadcrumbs from your intuition and your spirit that is guiding and leading you. So follow them, because it resides moment to moment to moment to moment. And on the other side, I know that is where you will live a life that is true instead of one that is prescribed.
Well, and it's also, but it's not even to say that comfortable is bad. Familiar isn't necessarily always bad, because I know with my husband, we met and he said he knew that I was going to be his wife within 30 seconds of our first hug.
His intuition.
He has very strong gut feelings. I mean, he's very, very in tune and in touch. So I think sometimes that familiar, that and if it is true that we had a past life together, that would make sense.
Definitely.
We always say that it feels like we've been together 10 years, not 4 years, whatever it is. There is something of that I think is probably a good thing if a familiarity, if you are coming into this lifetime with maybe a soul plan with someone else. Is that something that happens?
Absolutely. And I'd say, you can also just, just like you were saying, when we meet people, because there are people that you meet for the first time and you're like, oh my gosh, you're so familiar. I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
I feel like I've known you forever. In my world, I'm like, y'all had a past life experience together.
Totally.
Now, when I'm talking about familiar, there's a difference between what is familiar versus what is, what's the word that I want to look for? Restrictive. And I think what I'm also feeling is the energy. There's a familiarity energy when it's in alignment. It expands, opens up your heart space. It feels good in your body. Everything in you relaxes. It feels and resonates as true. Now, when I talk about safe or familiar, which I think maybe I'll also have to find some better, more precise languaging, it's what is predictable because it's what you know, and that is, we can get a lot of wonderful things from what is familiar, grounded, sense of safety. But at the same time, if we stay on that block, if you stay on just what's familiar, and it doesn't mean that you have to throw everything out the window, frying pan on the fire. It's just, again, piquing that curiosity to what is more.
I think more people than not live in that familiar zone. More people than not live in that constraint zone, in my opinion, from the people I've come in touch with.
Yeah, well, I'd say this: a lot of people aren't aware. Yeah. They aren't aware, and there is, and when I'm talking about awareness, it's something where our world, and especially now more than ever, we are constantly being informed by the outside world. Our phones, our computers, our emails, the TV, the kids, the whatever, that pops us out of even a general awareness or even our feeling body whatsoever. So there are, and I also just feel like there's a lot of people who haven't been exposed to different ideas or ways of living. And again, this comes to that place of choice. If that works for you, great. If you feel in alignment, great. But also maybe there's something on the other side that is curiosity, and I feel like a lot of people just are not that aware even of themselves.
So how do you combat that? How do we make more people aware? Because I think as a whole, everyone is better the more awareness we all bring to the picture. I feel like there's a lot of, you're either on this side, you're either on one side or the other. There's a lot of, you're like this or that, I feel like right now. Yeah. And I feel like there's either a push towards this growth or there's this other side. I mean, there's a lot of divide.
Yeah. Well, first, I would say that it's important first to not project that what is good for you is good for someone else.
Sure. Okay.
Right? So even just first and foremost.
Yeah.
Second, second, being curious. Living by example. So for example, I grew up in an intuitive family. The world has changed way a lot in the 30 plus years that I have been alive. And there was a lot of judgment. There were a lot of different things. And instead of having to defend or explain myself of, for example, when I was in third grade, we learned about Pompeii, and I was like, I had a past life there. I was like, I know this place, I'm like in French school. I'm like, I had a past life there. My teacher, Madame Bossy at the time, who was not a fan of me, I was like, no, you didn't, you're crazy. And instead of having to argue with her about proving my point, it was like, I'm just going to lead by example of what resonates as true for me and getting out of explanation or approval. And I'd say also in bridging the divide, period, we also have to recognize and look at what our shared values are. Because I do find that no matter what, in all sorts of different walks of life, that we share a lot more in common than we do, that we are different. Now, we might express those values in different ways, but when we get into, I was almost like, we call it like an ego dogfight of my way is the way, we end up not listening, we end up not being present. And I also just find that one of the most spiritual things that you can do with anyone, just as a practice, is just being present with who's in front of you. And I'll find that from there that instantly can create connection, instantly can get us out of that ego conversation of how are we different towards how are we the same, that then can lead towards having more productive conversations, period, whether it's about intuition, whether it's whatever it is, that brings a different sense of listening and respect.
Yeah. Like, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place.
That's
talking
okay.
about, like, different things, but, you know, this stuff just fascinates me in general, so.
Yeah. And, you know, I'd say that even within all of this, in what I know to be true is the more that I've been in ownership of what works for me, my gifts, my intuition, my past lives, and lead with authority instead of having to ask for approval, that also changes the conversation, that it's like, you can agree with me or not, but also that leading with confidence changes like the energetic matrix of how we've related, you know? So it makes me think of a story of when I lived in France and I went to a party, and French people are very intellectual and very heady. And so, you know, of course they're like, oh, what do you do? And usually when people ask me this, I always get a read, but sometimes I'll just say I'm a writer. If I'm doing a drive-by, I'm a writer. Well, what do you write about? And I'm like, well, I write about creativity and intuition. And I remember this one gentleman, really just a very intellectual guy, loved it, scientist, wanted to argue with me about the validity of what I do. Basically just trying to disprove me. And he's like, well, prove it. And the moment that I was like, you know, that's okay, that we think differently, let's change the subject. Let's talk about something else. It was interesting because then all of a sudden he leaned in and then he was like, wow, wait a minute, but I do want to talk about intuition and I do want to talk about these different things. And I'm like, well, it's okay. Like, we don't have to talk about it. It's all right. We don't resonate on this place. And it was so funny because by the end of the party, it was like clamoring. He's like, well, what about having a reading or doing something? And I'm like, I'm not available. That's okay. Because but it's for me, what I have found is the more that you're in ownership, the more that everything around you will organize and gets out of having to explain yourself.
Well, I feel like deep down, a lot of us know we have that intuitive spark in us. We have that intuition because just like you said, that a lot of people, maybe not openly, will talk about it, but you know, you'll get snippets here or there. Well, I had this gut feeling, or however they may couch it in their own way. And then you start talking about it, and then behind closed doors, they're just like, well, can you give me a reading, or can you tell me this, or can we go deeper? I mean, what are people reaching out for you with, like, regard to the subject of past lives? Like, what are people looking for when they're coming to you for a past life reading? Is it just more of the fascination of like, what was I in a past life, or is it more of like they're looking for some guidance?
Well, I'd say both. You know, I think where we can, first, curiosity of who I am in a past life. Yeah. But second of all, I think really what it also comes down to is a deeper understanding of how we are. You know, how we're built the way that we are. Gifts, blind spots, all of it. And I find that the more that we can have self-knowledge around our past lives, around our current life, the way that our gifts and our human blind spots, the more compassion and grace that we can have as we navigate life, because there can be a lot of expectation that I should be this way or that way or X, Y, Z. So I say that for me in past life readings, people, one, are very curious, because of course, who doesn't want to know who they were in a past life?
Sure.
And then second, I find for, you know, their understanding of themselves, understanding of how they are, and also as for a desire to heal and create change within their lives, and that some of that understanding of their emotional karmic imprint, some of their gifts and blind spots can give them a new perspective that can create change instead of feeling like you're in the same spinning your wheels, in a sense. Yeah. It's like, oh, wow, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if you can definitely get down to like, okay, that's why I am this way, or that's why I feel this way, you can find some sort of acceptance for yourself, and that can allow you to to radiate that outwards, and other people, it's not necessarily for the validation of other people to accept you, but you can own who you are better so that you can come into life and situations with more confidence and in your relationships.
Yeah, and I'd say, the thing is I do past life readings, but I do email readings, but also anybody can access their past life. This, I feel like you don't necessarily need to go to an intermediary, even just within your own mind's eye, if you want to even do a meditation. My favorite tool of starting to connect with your spirit is like hand on your heart, hand on your belly, take a deep breath in through your nose, imagine like you're breathing up through your feet, and exhale, like you're exhaling 10 birthday candles, even closing your eyes and bringing your attention inwards to then drop into your heart center. And, even just as imagining that you have like a movie screen in front of you, you can even use through the portal of my imagination of curiosity of, who was I in a past life, and just start to see what bubbles up from your body and to not judge it, because a lot of times that's where I think where we get blocked of, and where that portal of imagination and intuition and creativity, like they all come in together, can give you an information and access to not only your own soul history, but to your own past lives that you can connect to directly for yourself.
So do you teach people how to do this?
I haven't totally, but I feel like I have right now in one way or another. I did a YouTube video, but I'm a very big proponent of giving people, as I've learned in my family, to give people tools to access their own wisdom and their own authority. Because, it's almost like diplomacy. So where I give tools, I'm like, and support and encouragement, I'm like, yeah, my tools. And some people, I guess, in my mentoring clients that I've had, but yeah, so I guess I do. Yes, I do. I teach people all the time how to do all sorts of different things because it's what's interesting for them.
Yeah, and I think like what you say, it's like how you're doing it is a way I've learned how to do it through past teachers, through your mom, through listening to you and your sister and your whole family talk, but also through myself. Like, I know I'm a very visual person. I'm a very creative person. So I can like close my eyes and just see a whole scene in front of me. It's just like images come to me. So that's how I am. And I think when I talk about any of this stuff, I'm always kind of like, you need to hone in on, like, we all have our strengths in the way we receive our intuitive guidance.
Absolutely.
Not everyone's going to be like, hear a word, or not everyone's going to get a phrase, or, everyone's going to have their own way. So like, a simple way I would say to really start to, if you're curious about a past life or curious about your past in general, your past soul's history, is, like we said, talk about like the little breadcrumbs, the little interests that you have. Maybe take a moment and breathe it in and ask yourself, get curious with yourself, why? Like, why am I liking this? Why do I feel this way? And just kind of like go with it.
Yeah, the big thing that I'd say is the biggest roadblock is our conscious mind wants to figure it out with a very small amount of information that it has access to, which is just in our present lifetime. And just as you were saying, it's like different people have different ways that their intuition, their soul speaks to them. It's not a one size fits all. So if you're brand spanking new, think about any time you had a gut feeling, a hunch, and think about how that came in for you. And that can start to give you more, can give you knowledge of how your spirit and your intuition speaks to you. And then from that same place of have fun with it. That's my other thing. The more that we can have fun and lean into curiosity, even if it can be sometimes heavier things, the more that we can approach it with an unattachment and a levity, the more that we can be available to a different type of listening, which then is, I always find, even fun because it's a high vibration.
But yeah, at the same time, I love the idea of having fun with it. But, sometimes, I'm not the silliest person. Sometimes fun to me is doing a puzzle, I think there's different ways to have fun with it. I think you have to work your way into it. I mean, I always come back to the kids thing, being a mom with young kids. It's like, they are just the master at it. They just don't think, they do. They have fun. What are they doing? And we have to kind of connect back to that side of us, I think, to do it.
Yeah. I also think that fun in our world can be a loaded word.
It's hard. I think fun is hard.
Ooh, I find, so I just really quick, what is hard about fun for you? Like, just like even what comes up.
So to me, it's like fun. I've actually had conversations with quite a few people about it. And I remembered going through this in therapy years and years and years ago, like this whole question, like, what do you do for fun? And I was stumped. And I've had that conversation with others and asked them the same thing. And I think a lot of people become stumped, at least people I've come across, that, you know, even things that I used to do as a child, that I can go, okay, what did I really enjoy? Like reading books, imagining, playing dolls, that kind of stuff. Dancing, that was all fun to me then, and we don't bring that fun into our adult life. I feel like the idea of fun when you become an adult gets lost a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I absolutely feel that it does. And I would also say fun is different things for different people, but it's first, fun is purposeless. So much of our life has purpose. So many things that we have to do. It's like, you know, you have to, that, and it has to have like intention behind it. Second, I'd say that another component of fun is also about connection, being connected to other people, being dropped into the present moment, to be in a portal of listening. And also I'd say a lot of times good fun happens with other people. Yeah. You know? It's like where, you know, you can have a lot of fun at a dinner party. You can have a lot of fun creating a puzzle with your partner. You can have a lot of fun making dinner with somebody. But that, for me, when I think about fun, it's also a twin to like our intuitive self. And we put a lot of pressure on what it should be as like prescribed over the top type of stuff. And reality, it's, for me, I think about moments that I can, let go and really let go and be present. And I find that can be very hard because it's like, you know, we have to not be worried about judgment or be worried about the other things. So I also feel like it's important to make space for fun, where it's like I'm putting away the phone, I'm turning off the computer, and I'm going to be interested around what that looks like in present time. If it's a puzzle, great, awesome. That can be fun. You know, it doesn't have to be like dancing on the tabletops till 2 a.m. You know, unless that is fun. I mean, I can find that fun at times.
I find that a lot of fun. I haven't done that in quite some time, but yes. No, but when you say that, it does make sense when you say around other people, because some of the times I enjoy most, at least at this juncture in my life, and I think if I look back at all of the junctures in my life, it's usually having like really good in-depth conversations with someone, and that's when you're present. You're not looking at your phone. You're really engaged in the moment, and I think, you know, that is something that is fun to me. So
me too. You
know,
and I also would say a good signature of fun is when there's laughter present.
Yeah.
You know, when you can laugh, and even if talking about real stuff, you can still bring in humor. And I'd say even for, I'm a big proponent of fun as a great way to access your spirit intuition. I also just feel that it's not having to put pressure on it, and also surrounding yourself with other people who can have fun. I think company is really, really important, because I feel like when people are like little spirits squeezed out of their bodies, butt cheeks, scared, connected, restricted, it can be more of a challenge to have fun, unless like we can invite them in through, you know, for me, I'm like silliness. I think about even being on a dance floor with somebody who doesn't want to dance, and I will joke with them because it lightens up the ego. I'll be like, can we do a toe tap? Can we do you know? And then that invites people to play with you and have fun with you in different ways. And that's just like one example.
That just reminds me of junior high. I remember going to like a 7th grade or 8th grade dance and being so self-conscious and embarrassed, even though I danced for my whole entire life. So I was 2 years old until through high school. I was a dancer. And I'd go to a dance and I wouldn't want to dance because I was so self-conscious. Like, you know, finally getting to high school and stepping out and being like, no, I'm okay. I can do this. And then it's a blast, you know? So definitely like, it's kind of just letting your spirit out.
Yes. And there can be a barrier to entry if we're out of practice. I feel like it's the way that we're naturally designed to live. And just as you were talking about of just being of what's on the other side of like the other side of being uncomfortable. I mean, I think about myself in a middle school dance. I don't think I really came into myself until I was in my 30s. I mean, there was a long time in my 20s that I was really self-conscious and hyper aware and, just was like a sensitive, intuitive being that was just try hard until even coming back to my spirit. And I feel like even this, what are the things that you know to be true about yourself? What do you love about yourself? What are the things that you're proud of? Those are portals of entry to your spirit, to your gifts, to who you are. And then when we have better knowledge of that, that allows us to put a catcher's mitt between ourselves and life, so that, if you've got poopy diaper Peter in the corner who's giving you judgment and side eye for, out on the dance floor, we don't take that in as a reflection of our value or worthiness, and know that, it's like, have I hurt anybody? Have I done anything wrong? Is this, and then it's like, no, then I can just let it go, that it's not mine to fix, manage, take care of. And also, poopy Peter diaper probably wants to come play with me, but doesn't know how to have a hand in.
Right. Fun. Well, so, I mean, bringing it all back kind of to the beginning of the conversation is, you want to get in touch with your spirit. You want to get in touch with your soul. That's kind of almost like the hard drive of your past lives. It's kind of all encompassed in there, and it grows. And once you can open yourself up to it, you can start tapping into who you were, who you are, like what makes you you. And you're just kind of adding to it. You're adding, in this lifetime, you're adding to whatever lesson, knowledge here or there. And it all comes, mainly kind of the through line of everything we've talked about, comes back to relationship.
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite Ram Dass quotes is, as much as you think you've healed and grown, go spend a week with your family.
Yeah.
Because our relationships are our biggest karmic teachers, period. And relationships to ourselves, relationship in the world, relationship with the external world around us. And, we can use that as a thread to listen, learn, and again, like I was saying, developing that catcher's mitt between what is our responsibility versus what is other people's. And that's also where we can come back into the practice of faith in our higher selves and other people in spirit, so that our human self doesn't get afraid and feel like it has to manage it all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was so great to actually get to talk to you today.
I know. It was an honor and a pleasure to be your guest, Courtney.
You're my first guest.
I so love it. I've heard so many wonderful things about you from my mom. And, just within this, I am so proud of you, even just in your own soul history, and just being a model and a light for and a fellow light worker, because, living by example, sharing these conversations, sharing these essential truths are what I feel like help to create that spark that really bring people in on the healing of the planet. So I'm like, yes.
Well, it's not new to me. It's new to me to talk about it. I think is what it is, to put it out there. And I think that is one of the things I'm trying to do more of, is to go through this, even in my learning processes. I continue to learn more, to share as I learn, because I feel like it brings a different perspective, as opposed to me just preaching or teaching or this is what you do. Because I know I have some of this knowledge. I think we all have this knowledge in
Absolutely.
us. And where and how you tap into it, we are all going to do it at some point in our life in some way, shape, or form. But I think it's fascinating to be able to go through it and share that with others, so that they can feel more comfortable going through it too. And if I'm learning, hopefully someone else is learning at the same time. And
I love that. And it's so true, because, it's like often our ego intellect can think that we're alone, but when we recognize and share just what is true, our vulnerabilities, that instantly connects us. Because I know for me as a human being, I am very much a human being. I'm learning all the time. I make mistakes all the time. I am, but I am proud of just the growth. So I love that, and I'm with you, just like sharing. Nobody has it all together.
No, and I think learning, I another thing that I do talk about quite often is, like, you have to learn. That's living. Learning and growing is living.
And it's messy.
It is really messy. It is not easy.
No, but it's a creative process, It's like the more mess, there's magic in the mess,
There really, really is. So how can people find you, work with you, get a reading from you, get your book, all the good stuff?
Yes. I have all sorts of different channels. So you can come to my website, soniatully.com. I do hour-long intuitive readings where we look at your soul history, your specific burning questions. You can get an email past life reading from me. You can check out my book that I wrote with my sister, You Are Amazing. Listen to my family podcast. It's all related. I got a YouTube channel, Instagram. I have tons of different channels. And also, you can head to my site. I have a free workbook on developing your intuition, a guided meditation, or you could take your soul type quiz to learn more about what kind of spirit and soul you are. So I have tons of resources across the board. So yeah, come give me a visit, soniatully.com.
That is really exciting. I know I eat it up whenever I can learn from anyone and everyone. I think the more people you can learn from in general, the more well-rounded and better everything is going to be.
Amen is one of my
things. I will say, we are always talking about the same thing. I don't care if you call it God, the universe, spirits. I don't care what you call it. Everything always comes back to the same thing. It's just how you want to hear it.
I love that, Courtney. You are speaking my language.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time today. And I hope we get to talk again soon.
It will be an honor and a pleasure. I would love to be back. Thank you so much for the invitation. And sending you all my love.
And I know we usually set an intention of the week, but because this week was a little bit different and we had such a wonderful guest on the show, I'm going to incorporate some lessons she gave us into an intention for you. My intention for you this week is to tap into your interests and ask your spirit if it's something relating to your past, if it's something relating to a past life. Start to dig a bit deeper and uncover where your past may be playing out in your present so that you can really start to own your soul's lessons. It is said that the past always repeats itself, so I bet your past lives are more present than you really think. And if you want to live intentionally, you have to start to intentionally connect with what you are here in this present life to work on. So dig in and see where it takes you. That is my intention. Thank you so much for listening to Intentional Living with Courtney Myers this week. And don't forget to follow us for new episodes every Wednesday. We will be having more guests come on more frequently, and I'm really excited about that. Today was wonderful talking to Sonia Tully. You can find out more about intentional living on our website, The Intentional Home and Living at CourtneyMyers.com, and get even more intentional with our YouTube and social sites. Links are in the show notes. Thank you once again, and thank you, Sonia, once again. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.